All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles podcast. Super excited for today, guys, because we are actually here in person at Customer Contact Week in Las Vegas. I have with me today Mr. Trey Wade. Trey, say hello to the CX Nation, my friend.
Hello, CX Nation. Super excited to be here.
So, Trey, why don't you start off today's episode like we start off all these shows?
Yeah.
Give the listeners, number one, a sense for who you are and the work that you're doing at Coors Spirit Co., and give us a little sense for how you got into this trade with working with customers and making incredible customer experiences along the way.
Yeah, a fun background story, and I'm speaking today at 12, so I'll give a little sneak peek into that. Prior to even being in the spirits industry, I was worked for the Department of Defense in various capacities, focusing on human behavior.
Awesome.
Career change opportunity came about, and so I used a lot of what I was able to learn in that field and applied it to consumer purchasing goods, specifically spirits. Yep. I have a background. I lost a bet, went to culinary school. There's a story. It's a part of my speech later. Don't want to give it away, but that allowed me to kind of leverage something I was passionate about and turn it into a profession.
Nice.
So very fortunate to be a part of a startup company called Blue Run Spirits. We started that company in 2020.
Where was it located?
Based out of Kentucky, but the team is a conglomerate of folks from LA to New York to North Carolina, down to Florida, all over the place. But then fast forward, we hit our 10-year plan in about a year and a half. And so we got acquired by Coors in August of last year.
Fantastic.
Going from a startup, scrappy, crazy, to a 150-year-old heritage legacy company, there's a lot of integration that has to happen both internally and externally. So my role as head of consumer experience allows me to play a part in figuring out the identity of the culture of the team moving forward, and then how that translates to our customers interacting with our business.
Awesome.
And so that my day is a lot of in-betweens of those, but mostly making sure that the culture and the passion of our product comes through both internally and externally.
Okay, that's fantastic, man. So, number one, working in spirits, you picked a hell of a game, my friend. That's something that it's one of those recession-proof industries, but it's also something that, like, you had so many different types of walks of life or different appetites for different types of spirits that are out there.
100%.
But that's got to be a fun business to be a part of.
It doesn't suck. I tell people all the time, it's funny and true story. I wrote my job description, so if I have a bad day, it's usually my fault.
Yeah, right. I love it. Trey, talk with us a little bit about your team, man. So, like, the team that you've been able to personally build out at Coors, the team that you work with every single solitary day. What's that kind of look like? What are some of the roles? What are some of the different focus areas that you've got folks working on?
Yeah, so I'm extremely fortunate where I get to be a conduit between sales, marketing, and operations. So I oversee capacities of all of that, and then we have people that have specific team player roles outside of that. But so from a sales standpoint, we're blowing this thing up. We went from last January we had 0 salespeople. This year we have 15. So growing pretty quick for a company of our size. And then operations is double that size. You can imagine logistics and supply chains a big deal, getting stuff to and from places.
Big time.
And then our operations team also comprises of our compliance folks, right? So one of the most regulated things in the world, second to money itself, is whiskey, spirits in general.
Really?
And so 82%, I think last year was our average either cost of between taxes. So about 60% of a bottle is taxes.
Wow.
And so managing that workflow, and then the rest is cost of goods. So you're only making 15 to 20% margins at best if you're not scaled up. So I oversee some operational stuff, and then from a marketing standpoint, a lot of what we do is based on consumer perspective. How they look, feel, and interact with your product. And so I play a role in all of those, and the team has to work really cohesively together because it's very easy to, even at a small scale, get siloed into kind of the lone wolf mentality.
Totally.
And so a lot of what I do is make sure that I'm not only building bridges internally between our different departments, but externally, that translates into how consumers experience our product, right? So if I buy a bottle from one of the various outlets and I need to trace down information, shouldn't have to jump through 9 holes to get there.
100%.
So one quick message, either social media, we leverage that quite a bit, our contact lines, etc. And so all of that rolls up to me in some capacities, and so and I focus in on one particular area of the program, which is our private barrel sales. It's a high margin revenue stream for us.
What does that entail? Get a little bit deeper into that last part.
100%. So this is super fun. Yeah. So
what's the high end stuff look like?
Yeah, I mean, so for folks that don't know, you walk into a liquor store and the vast majority of the spirit that you see on a shelf is a blended product. Right. Meaning we take multiple barrels or cask, we blend them together, and we produce a product that's industry term is small batch. There's no legal definition for small batch. However, it's really just a representation of what you produce, right? If I make 1 million barrels a year, a small batch can be 100,000 barrels. If I make 100 barrels, 5 barrels can be a small batch, right? However, there's a niche area in the industry called single barrels.
Yep.
So barrels are like snowflakes. They're like human beings. No two are exactly alike.
Yep.
And so I can make spirit today, put it in a barrel.
Yep.
I can make a tank full of spirit today and spread it across 50 barrels and age them for the exact amount of time, relatively close to each other in the barrel storage house. And they'll all be unique at the end. And there's wood science and chemistry, all that stuff plays a factor in there. Terroir, there's a lot of different things that play factors there. But I offer a unique program where you can literally buy our whiskey by the barrel that we will custom label and bottle for you. It's co-branded, so it's in our packaging, but we co-brand it and label it for you. And so that is.
And who's buying this stuff? This is personal people. This is business owners. Who's buying this?
It runs the gamut, man. I've sold barrels to obviously your traditional outlets, your liquor stores, your state control boards, restaurants, etc. But we also have individuals that either have societies or podcasts even that will buy barrels and leverage them for awareness. Right? We were the top 5 fastest growing brand in luxury spirits 2 years in a row.
Wow. What's a barrel like that going to cost you, Trey? What are you going to spend for that type of barrel?
So you're looking anywhere between $12,000 to $20,000.
Okay.
Right. Depends on the barrel. Depends on the yield. So it's not like going to the grocery store and saying, hey, like this box of goods costs this, regardless of how full it is. Right. They don't count the potato chips that go in the bag. It's more of a yield. So if I sell you a barrel, there's some economics that go into it, age, etc. And then if that barrel only yields 100 bottles, it's going to cost less than if a barrel yields 200 bottles, because you pay for what you actually get out of the barrel, not just the whole barrel itself. So, but it's a really fun process because it is another level that we get to interact with our consumers beyond just your traditional walk into a store, grab a bottle off the shelf, don't know who's behind it, how they made it, etc. Unless you go do the deep dive. We focus in on meeting our consumers where they are.
Love that. I love that. Trey, I'd love to kind of get a sense for what some of the technology is. So we're at Customer Contact Week in Las Vegas this week. You got a bunch of different.
It's wild in there.
There's so many different
really cool
players here, right? You get different software companies, different BPOs, different agency types that are here. But like, what's some of the technology that you and your team have had to build out to be able to do some of the things you're doing? You're working with all these different customer sets. You're trying to get all these different signals from a market around what they like, what they don't like, what they want, what they don't want. What does your tech stack look like, or how do you even go about building a tech stack? You can Coors Spirits go. One might think you might have like an old school type of tech stack, but I got to imagine
you are 1,000,000% right. And so
what does it look like?
Full transparency. This integration has been not just cultural, but from a business standpoint as well. Yes, Coors. This is the same Coors that owns Coors Light and High Life, Miller High Life, etc. And they make Blue. They make hundreds of different beers. Right. And so about 3 years ago, and I'm gonna give some context before I answer your question directly. About 3.5 years ago, Gavin Hattersley is our now CEO president, put his flag in the ground and said, "Hey, we need to think beyond beer." That's been our rally cry for the last few years, because for the last 145 years, the only thing that Coors has done was beer. David Coors, who is 5th generation Coors family, actually oversees the spirits division. He's the reason that Coors is in spirits, period. About 25 years ago, he's riding home with his father, Pete Coors, from college, and says, "Hey, Dad, I've been getting a business degree, an engineering degree," and says, "I really think I like whiskey, and we're halfway there. You got to make beer to make whiskey in the process." And he says, "I think we should make a whiskey." And Pete Coors doesn't take his hands off the wheels or even look at David. He goes, "Son, we do one thing well, and that's make beer." And that was the end of the conversation for 25 years. Fast forward, Pete retires to the board. He's still very active in the business. Gavin comes in, and now we have this platform to go out and expand the portfolio. And so if you've paid attention to Coors in the past 5 or 6 years, things like energy drinks and non-alcoholic have all become a part of the portfolio. And as 3.5 years ago, spirits. And so that being said, there are way more regulations associated with spirit than beer. And so processes of tracking everything from audit controls to just production processes and compliance for import, export in and out of different markets. And so leaning into that, we had to reinforce and somewhat reinvent some of the infrastructure that already existed. You can't ship alcohol the same way you ship beer. And so that's a big avenue. Production as well, barrel storage. I can make beer today and sell it next week. That's just not how whiskey works.
So this is where you're seeing the pop-up of all these different craft breweries in every single city in America, because there is a lower level of regulation.
Lower level regulation, less of an outlay to get involved, right? So, for example, if I invest $100 million in whiskey today, I probably won't make $1 million for 5 years profit. You know, and that's if I'm lucky.
So it's a long path.
Long path. I make whiskey today. I don't even put it in a bottle for 4 to 6 years. So I just have to sit there and look at it, and I pay taxes on those barrels every year. Barrel storage fees every month. You know, tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Oh, and then 60% of my business is taxed. Right. You know, and so it's a massive capital investment, but all of that, you know, leads back to your question. Tracking that internally was a net new challenge for the business in this particular capacity. But then externally, the consumer group is also very, very different. Okay. It's almost, you know, most people that drink gin don't drink other spirits, right? It's a very niche craft spirit. Yeah. A lot of people that drink craft beer maybe turn their nose up at commercial, you know, large scale beer, and vice versa. People are kind of in their lanes. And so Coors knows intimately their consumer group on the spirit side, on the beer side. And a part of this process was really learning, and this is one of the reasons they acquired, you know, our company, Blue Run, is that we did a really, really good job of having a direct line to consumers and being highly, highly engaged with our consumers. Awesome. And we did that through a couple of different mechanisms, mostly organic. Mostly organic. Social media is candidly one of the best platforms. It's free for everybody out there. You can do it right for free to a certain scale, right? Totally. And we did that. And we went from zero to a lot really fast. Okay. And
so, like, just to expand on this, you were doing everything. You were doing social runs. You were showing up at bars. You were literally getting
phone calls, handwritten letters to people. You'd buy a bottle of our CEO, Mike Montgomery, co-founder and CEO, Mike Montgomery, would literally handwrite a note. I'm talking thousands, tens of thousands. Every bottle that was purchased, he would handwrite and mail a note to the consumer.
That's crazy.
And, you know, it's one thing to do it when you're selling like a car every other month.
Totally, yeah.
To do it for thousands of bottles and still run a multi-million-dollar business. A startup business during COVID, right? Like, you know, life is happening outside of work, all of those things. And so, and our entire team adopted that, right? So everyone from a guy named John McKnight, who's our head of operations in Kentucky, he will write it. He's prolific in the industry now for being the type of guy that reaches out and touches consumers in a really meaningful way. They remember your birthday. The team that we have is kind of psychopathic when it comes to keeping up with like the things that matter to our consumers. You know, birthdays, holidays, dogs' birthdays.
But hearing you say this, though, Trey, there was this dude that we had on the show a year or two ago. I'm trying to blank on his name, but he would talk about 7 deep and 3 wide, and basically with every one of your true customers that are either going to make that month's goal happen on the bottom of the south side, or whether it's going to be that customer that you already know is going to do the renewal, they're going to sign the next contract to keep buying the product or service. His whole point was like, if you don't know 7 things deep and 3 wide about every one of your customers. So he would literally, the things that you're laying out, wife's name, dog's name, how many kids, sons or daughters, which college did they go to, what, like just the sports teams. And it makes sense when you think about, just in general, man, people like to buy and people like to do business with the folks that they actually like,
100%.
People that they want to spend time with, people that they want to spend some money on, or spend and share money around. And it's funny, man, so it sounds like you guys were just killing that at a very early age, and then you went and taught a much larger entity and a much bigger business how you can do that at scale.
It's cool because it's a very two-way learning street with Coors, right? There's a lot of reasons that they made sense from that. We weren't for sale, candidly. Like, just kind of serendipitous timing. Perfect time in the market, perfect time for them, perfect time for us, came together. So there's a lot that we're learning from them about scale, because you don't just go from, nothing to a $16 billion company without learning a few lessons.
Got to learn a couple things along the way,
especially over 150 years.
I
mean, Marie Antoinette.
I was going to say, in time's
like
got to pass.
Marie Antoinette, like multiple world wars, like they've been around. They've been the pandemics, epidemics, they've been through some things. We were born in a pandemic, but that makes life even more weird outside of a pandemic. So, but it's kind of circling back to your question, right? The street's two-way, and we've had a really cool opportunity to kind of go out and beta test things on behalf of the organization at scale, from a software and a processing standpoint. Tracking back to the program that I run, the program is called Chosen. Our private barrel program is called Chosen, if someone wants to look it up. It's really cool because I built this online design generator where it's very Nike ID-esque, and a homage to one of our co-founders, Devin McKinney, who actually is the executive director for the Nike Air Force One franchise.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no big deal.
That's a pretty big deal, Trey.
The man is a creative genius.
What the heck?
And yeah, he's just salt of the earth dude, super down to earth. He'd walk in a room full of billionaires in a t-shirt and sweatpants, and still be the flyest, most educated, intelligent, artistic person in the world.
I love that.
So he's the one that designed our branding, our packaging, and so we get a lot of serendipitous alignment to kind of the structure, how we dropped our product, how it looks aesthetically. But I built this design generator that was. Imagine essentially a consumer survey, but they got something out of it.
Okay.
And not like a gift card, but they got something bragging rights and tangible.
Okay.
So most often in the industry, to get a private barrel, even have access and opportunity to buy one, you've got to have spent X number of dollars on any product, right? There's
just to even be able to place an order of one of
to
these.
even be able to order one, you've got to be high up on the scale of
Okay.
like, hey, I order all of your low, bottom shelf stuff.
Yep.
Give me an opportunity to buy your top shelf stuff. I'm a big equal opportunity person. I said, look, there's a lot of people out there that will never own a liquor store. They'll never go start a restaurant.
Totally.
But 100%, if they were presented the opportunity to do something, especially in the charity realm, like have a luxury bottle of spirit produced for them, they would do it. It's a great vehicle to generate money and revenue for nonprofits. So this design generator was essentially a draft portal. So imagine NBA draft, right?
Yep.
And every person went online, entered all your general contact information. So it was a great tool to capture information for us. But then they got to design their bottle, pick their label colors, their butterfly colors, put text on their bottle, all that good stuff.
That's awesome.
And that was their submission. Fast forward, so there's the entry, but nobody cares.
How many people would sign up for this?
Over 2,700 people in 2 weeks signed
these are all
up.
connoisseurs. These got to be people that know the business.
These are people who are
understand
tuned in. Like we were selecting 16, and 2,700 people submitted.
Crazy.
And no paid advertising, just 100% organic. So this was the 13th of February last year, the day after the Super Bowl. We launched it. March 23rd, I hosted a live streamed draft.
Okay.
So every entry was engraved into a little wooden oak coin, because oak and whiskey.
Yeah.
Went into a barrel, rotated on live stream, and different people came up and reached in. And the first to be chosen in the 2023 Blue Run Spirits Private Barrel Draft is X, Y, and Z. And you could be anybody.
That's
cool. And so many stories came in of, man, I was sitting in my basement. Remember doing this, like, no chance I was winning, and all of a sudden, like, my name's being broadcasted in front of 20, 40,000 people online, and I get to do this really great experience. So the prize was, look, you get to select a barrel, but all of my selections are curated to their consumers.
Okay.
So, for example, there's a group in South Florida, amazing group, called the Volusia Bourbon Society. These guys raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for charity in their pastime as a part of their passion of whiskey. So they were one of the folks that won. And so I said, guys, let's do something different. Let's not just go in a rick house and thieve out of a barrel, et cetera. Let's go do something really cool. So next thing you know, we end up on a $4 million yacht in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, drinking super high-end whiskey.
Sounds like a freaking dream day, my friend.
It did not suck.
Yeah, it sounds like a dream day.
But it was super cool because they got to create content, advertise, and advocate for what they've got going on.
Yeah.
And we aligned with what their focus is, and it really just showcased that. And candidly, it cost less because, one of the group members owned the boat. So it costs less than flying people to kind of a stale environment where they're going to do the same rigmarole that they do everywhere else.
Absolutely.
And so the tools that we used to go through that process were two just different digital design platforms, worked with an AI-generated software, and then allowed a randomizer to be created as well from that. So it was a little bit of layer complexity, but the cool thing about it is Coors learned so much from that on how to tangibly gain consumer information.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't just, hey, fill this survey out for 10% off shipping.
Yep.
We actually made money off of it. We didn't give anything away.
Yep.
And so it was just kind of a different way to look at how to capture like the right consumer group's information.
Yeah, so Trey, hearing you say that makes me think a couple things over the years, because you're right, you talk about a business like this that's so old, it's gone through so many different waves of evolution, it's literally gone through all these different periods of history. When you talk about that survey piece, can you just spend like 60 seconds talking about like, how have they gone from the survey collection piece you just talked about? And then another place where my brain's floating right now is like, are you talking just to distributors, like the large buyers, the companies that are literally going to buy a bunch of different types of booze for a Buffalo, for example, they're one of the primary distributors of Buffalo, and then how are they separating to actually get the consumer feedback? So like, I got to imagine back in the day they were doing a bunch of old school ways of collecting the survey from the distributor side and consumer side. how can you kind of walk through like what the evolution of that's looked like in terms of how they've sort of gotten better at collecting this, even if it's just like using different tools or using different software, or if it's just getting tighter where they actually have to find that feedback to be able to collect it and aggregate it and kind of understand what to do with it?
Yeah, so Coors has done a really good job of learning what not to do and not doing it again. And what
Learning
I mean
from
by
the mistakes.
100%, right? And so they've gone through an evolution on the beer side. So internally, we're the small potatoes in the larger wheel, but we got the beer side and we got the spirit side. The beer side, they've got army of folks that do everything with remote, like space planning. And
How
not
many
like
employees are at Coors Spirits?
a lot.
Like, is it a football stadium?
I think we're somewhere close to like 25,000.
So it's a hockey arena?
Yeah, like direct Coors employees, but then you've got to realize that, we own a bunch of other smaller craft breweries that, we have like Yingling, we have a stake in Yingling.
Used to drink Yingling in college, Trey.
I still drink Yingling. Shame in my game.
It was one of the oldest breweries, like
Pennsylvania. Shout out to Pottsville, Pennsylvania. Yeah, they opened up a location, like a production location in Orlando too. That's pretty cool. But they have an army of folks that go out and collect kind of hard data, traditional stuff, right?
Yep.
But now all of that data gets aggregated and comes back to a space planning team, where that team will literally say, you've got 10 by 10 in your footprint.
Yep.
Based on the consumers in your area, how they're buying, what they're buying, the types of occasions they're buying for.
Yep.
Here's how we can maximize that space, get the right brands on that shelf in the right capacities, et cetera. And they use a myriad of tools to do that.
Okay.
It's pretty impressive. Like when you say space planning, they could probably figure out how to get beer into outer space if we challenge them with that. But
I love that.
But they focus mostly on space planning. So they use, and that a lot of that is based on consumer perception, right?
Okay.
The more of a product on a shelf sometimes doesn't look great.
Yeah.
And so they'll take craft brands and they'll say, well, we need 2 rows of this particular craft brand, but it's got to be these 2 particular SKUs based on the clientele in your demographic, right? And it falls into one of 2 buckets. Are we trying to nurture or are we trying to expand?
Yeah.
If it's a less of a progressive market, then we won't go to that market with necessarily a net new SKU. It'll be something that is tried and true in other more progressive markets.
Yep.
So there's software for that, and all that is fed by survey tools.
Okay.
And then on the spirit side, a lot of what we're doing right now internally is figuring out not the longevity, but kind of the objectives of each of our employees, right? Some of the folks are rooted in spirits. They've been in spirits for their entire career. And a lot of folks have, transitioned over from the beer world.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of learning tools internally of saying, from your experience, wherever you've come from, what are areas of our leadership team, we really, really want to know that we're stewarding our employees well through their career. This is a big risk for them and us to jump into spirits at this scale. Yeah. And so we're doing a lot of internal surveys and then having meaningful roundtable conversations. We have this rule that nothing's off the table.
Yep.
And we literally mean that. We put a bunch of stuff on the table, and everything has to be spoken about before we get up. We commit gross amounts of time to that. It's meaningful though.
Yep. One of my very good friends in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, he was a part of building a really large whiskey brand down in Texas, and we had the pleasure of kind of watching the several-year process because it was
painful.
He worked at this place for almost a decade in terms of doing everything, but I thought it was such a cool business and was such an interesting space. But the timepiece that you keep talking about, Trey, and the reason why you got to be so thoughtful and methodical, diligent with making sure that you understand all these different, it's because of the time commitment and the investment, just the general, this stuff takes time, right? It's truly a craft. It's truly a craft of a good that you guys are producing and that you're distributing across the world.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things where you can't fake the funk, right? And what I mean by that is, again, I can make insert X, Y, and Z good today, right?
Yep.
But I gotta wait it out and sweat it out, and then hope that 4 years from now, and sometimes longer, 10 years, 20 years from now, that what I made back then still makes sense today.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where you have to just be, steadfast in your belief and your production and your quality, and allow your story to develop and be authentic. And the folks internally have to buy into that. And they've got to know how to articulate that externally so that our consumers understand that there are tens of thousands of spirits brands popping up left and right, and a lot in the whiskey space. It is hard to be differentiating without your people leading the way. If your team is not the differentiator, your product doesn't matter. And so we focus heavily right now in our infancy stages. We're focused very heavily on making sure our team is equipped.
Yep.
Our team is supported. They have the visibility into what we have going on at scale, and then they also have the autonomy in the market to go out and be a little bit creative.
Yeah, right.
You know, the easy thing to do right now in this early stage is be kind of tight-fisted and say,
agree. Yeah.
we don't know if we are going to be able to make this make sense long term. But the challenge to us as a leadership team is we hired the right people.
Yep.
We're equipping them with the right tools. Let them go do what we hired them for with what we've given them.
Love that. Love it. Trey, before we get ready to wrap up, man, just 2 or 3 big things that you and your team were hoping to get out of like an event like this.
Yeah.
Like we're at Customer Contact. We mentioned it earlier. We got all these awesome providers that have showed up here to do all of these things or to help companies or customer-focused business leaders like you do all of these things that we're talking about extremely well. What were like the 1 or 2 or 3 big things that you were super excited about maybe taking away from an event like this, or that you already know that you're trying to pull into your team and pull into your part of the business over at Coors?
So it's no secret to anyone in the world right now that artificial intelligence is taking over.
Wait, that's a big. That's
Skynet is here.
This
all
is
right?
an important thing. Okay.
we're doomed, and so I'm really heavily interested in seeing how we can integrate AI into consumer packaged goods.
Interesting.
So both augmented reality and AI in terms of trend tracking and packaging, specifically the packaging. I think there's a really cool opportunity to introduce some AI into
different types of
packaging.
Packages, different ways that we go grab our beer, different ways we go grab our spirits.
100%. A big gap in the space right now, a little trade secret for the folks out there listening. A big gap in the space is inventory management for people that are collecting large amounts of product, right? Now you go to your buddy's house and all of a sudden he's got a wine bar in his house.
Totally.
This wasn't the case 10 years ago. The rich, maybe had a wine cellar, but they didn't have a wall of whiskey. And
that's worth money too, by the way.
It's all,
some of my friends have like thousands of dollars up on a wall, and
a
layman would walk in and they don't realize that somebody walks in knows their
an
spirits. That's literally a couple grand. It's a savings account basically.
Easily. And it's all, it's a commodity for it. And so I think there's a really great opportunity to generate some tools that equip enthusiasts and curious consumers, right? Because I think there's also an educational aspect that's
almost
missing.
Like a StockX for spirits.
Very comparable, yeah. You've got to be careful with StockX, or excuse me, with purchasing, because there's lots of laws around that. But inventory management and just tradability and value, right? Like true valuation. So working with folks like Sotheby's and like auction houses to figure out like how do we track that, and then how do we measure that in a quantifiable way?
Love that. And it's like a visible portfolio in the phone or something like that.
Where NFC, where you scan the bottle, it goes into your virtual bar, and all of a sudden you can say, look, I've got, I'm guilty of this. Like I've got about 2,200 bottles in my personal collection.
2,200. So you got way more than a couple $1,000 in your collection, my friend.
It's insured. And it runs the gamut. It's not just whiskey, wine,
cool, though. That's cool.
All spirit and wine. But I've got some beer in the beer fridge. There's oftentimes, and I keep an inventory, but it is a very manual, laborious process. And so,
spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet.
So, yes, I got like 2 different apps, a spreadsheet, and they never really work together. There's a personal project that I'm trying to turn into a business project.
And those spirits are going up and down just like a market.
It's absolutely ridiculous, there's an opportunity. Like I'll walk into a store and I'll say, I've seen that label before somewhere. At this point, I've interacted with tens of thousands of different bottles and spirit. And so it's, as big as I try to keep my brain and sharp as I try to keep myself, I just can't remember everything.
It's hard. It's so many things. Every single day there's new
And so having this tool to just quick reference and say, not only this is where I've had that bottle, but this is what I remember about that bottle. And, whether I do a voice note or something, if I can just track that and catalog that all in one place, I think that's massive. And from a business standpoint, it allows me to kind of have insight into where the trends are. The secondary market in whiskey is big, and if people are buying this particular type of finished whiskey and they're valuing it in a particular way, and there's 2 different ways to look at it, right? You've got depletions and you've got things that are coming off the shelf. If somebody's buying something and not drinking it, it can mean one of 2 things: either it sucks or it's worth something. And it's hard to know the difference unless you can have that insight into how people are stewarding it, what they're talking about. So I just think there's a big opportunity there, and we're looking to be a part of that solution.
Love that. So, Trey Wade, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. Thank you so much for coming on the Secrets Chronicles podcast, sharing your story, sharing all this awesome. This is one of the coolest chats today, man. I promise you. But before I let you go, where can people learn more about you? Where can people connect with you or connect with your team so they can learn more about some of the awesome stuff that you guys are doing at Coors Spirits?
Absolutely. So, BlueRunSpirits.com is our most current and active page right now. We are Blue Run Spirits on all platforms: Facebook, social, Instagram. I think we have a Twitter, LinkedIn. LinkedIn, all the good things.
Awesome.
And then I am just_whiskey_ on Instagram, and I try to make sure that I follow everybody and talk to everybody. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me because you can keep up with where I am and I can communicate with you. So it's great.
I love it. And you're in the town right here that's probably buys a lot of spirits, aren't you?
Lots of fun in Vegas. Lots of fun in Vegas. It's fun. It's fun.
I love it. Well, Trey, thank you so much for joining the CXC, man. Best of luck in the future. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Adrian.